Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling with the Business, and we come to you this evening with some recently breaking news. There have been a lot of goings-on in the backstage area and even in the boardroom of WWE. Seems there were a couple of recent firings off of the board. Jer, why don't you tell us a little bit more of what's been going on?
Yeah, so we've been talking an awful lot lately about the story and kind of what's been going on in front of the camera. And for the last little while, we haven't talked an awful lot about the business side of it. These last 36 hours have been very tumultuous. I was tracking WWE stock like I do pretty much every day, just glancing at it a few times a day, checking it out, and didn't notice anything particularly interesting. And I do have it set to alert. About 3 or so hours after closing, I got a ding alert on my phone notifying me that the WWE stock had dropped over 20%. After hours trading. Not during the day, after the day.
It's the lowest it's been in a couple of years, right?
Yeah. I'll take a look at the stock trend here in a second, but certainly to drop. Remember, this is after hours. This is not during active trading in the United States Stock Exchange. This is basically like futures. You're basically trading in futures at this point because nobody can actually do a transaction. So you're trading on what tomorrow morning is going to hold. So the price is going to hold, but then there's a second price. Well, in WWE's case, it was like this. But at first I thought it was a mistake. I didn't think anything of it. And about 15, 20 minutes later, I started seeing news reports about how the stock is plummeting, and I realized it wasn't a joke. So I started doing some research, and I have one source here, which was actually written earlier today, Friday the 31st, from Barron's. This is from Barron's, talking about how the stock plunged 25%. And I'm just going to read directly from it because it's pretty succinct. World Wrestling Entertainment shares are in the midst of a bloodbath normally reserved for the ring. As a result of the sudden resignation of the co-presidents George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, WWE stock has plunged 19% to $50.76 as of 10:28 a.m. Friday, a bad loss, but better than the 25% pre-market tumble. At Thursday's close, WWE stock was down 35% since its April 23rd, 2019 peak. The two resignations are effective immediately, and the duo will no longer sit on the board. Quote, "I am grateful for all that was accomplished during their tenure, but the board and I decided a change was necessary as we have different views on how to best to achieve our strategic priorities moving forward," unquote. WWE Chairman and Chief Executive Vince McMahon said in a statement on Thursday. Current board member Frank Riddick III, who serves on the Compensation and Audit Committees, is stepping in as interim Chief Financial Officer while the company looks for a permanent CFO and Chief Revenue Officer. Analysts are busy tying themselves in knots, explaining why the changes aren't, quote, necessarily, unquote, bad news. Quote, "A change in the C-suite does not necessarily mean more bad news is coming," unquote, writes MKM Partners analyst Eric Handler. Quote, "This change, in our view, was unexpected. Investors are now even more concerned about 2020 adjusted OIBDA guidance. However, given the known step up in the domestic TV rights deal, we do not believe the company is in a, quote, precarious, unquote, financial position." Of course, it's worrisome whenever an analyst uses the word precarious to describe their financial situation, even when he's trying to dispel the notion. WWE now expects to report adjusted full-year 2019 earnings of $180 million on February 6th, at the low end of the previous projections. Ratings have been choppy for WWE in recent years. Last year, Vince McMahon complained on an earnings call that the injuries and other absences from wrestlers forced the WWE to axe or redo storylines. So, this is very bad. This is it is very difficult for me to exaggerate how bad this is. This is the Montreal screw job of finances. It's a sort of perfect storm. We talked in our last earnings video towards the end of last year about the things that WWE needs to do financially if they want to ensure success. And we talked about how they needed to sort of play these two factors off of each other if they wanted to be successful. They needed uncertainty in front of the camera, and they needed certainty and predictability behind the camera. And the two are going to feed each other. Success breeds success. So if they can put a whole bunch of uncertainty in front of the camera, they're going to get a whole bunch of people watching, a whole bunch of people showing interest, buying tickets, subscribing to the WWE network, buying merchandise, watching their movies, doing all the, just taking in the product. And then that would drive certainty and stability within the company financially. And again, that's going to breed more success. This is the exact opposite of that. I am extremely confident, 99% confident that Vince McMahon will be on this call on February 6th. He is going to have to speak. He cannot stand in front of investors after firing the two people that have led the calls to share with investors how the business is doing. He cannot shit can those people, and that's what happened. They call it a resignation, and that's just polite professional speak. Mm-hmm. If it was the choice of George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, they would have said that there would have been a step down period, or I'm moving into retirement, or there'll be a transition period to make sure that, to drive certainty with investors so that the stock doesn't do this. The stock plummeted 20% because their resignations were effective immediately. WWE waited until the very end of the day to drop the news so that it wouldn't hit while the markets were open. They should have dumped it on a Friday. I don't know why it got dumped on a Thursday. Maybe it ended poorly, either with Michelle Wilson or George Barrios. Maybe they said that they would go public or tank the company or something like that. I don't know. But so they felt like, the company felt like they were forced to make a statement on it before Friday night. But it effectively has not recovered. It's still trading just above $48. My recommendation stands. Everyone should go out and buy a little bit now. So you have subscriptions continuing to drop, which I'm sure is what's going to get reported. Revenue was on the low end, so they keep adjusting their projections down. The last projection was between 180 and 190 million. Now they're saying they're only going to come in at 180 million, which is going to start creating questions like, okay, you're making all these extra investments in new talent, right? They're signing all these new people. They're going back to Saudi Arabia again. The build up to WrestleMania, right? WrestleMania is a huge expense that you don't necessarily see a return on until you get to WrestleMania. You invest in all of the infrastructure and all the travel, and really all that you're getting in immediately are ticket sales and VIP packages. Mm-hmm. But the return comes from the investment of actually doing it and people subscribing or buying the pay-per-view. You're not going to get a lot of immediate return on your investment. It's going to come subsequently. The advertisers and things like that, that money doesn't come in until after the fact. There might be a down payment in front of it, but the bulk of it's going to come afterwards. All that is driving uncertainty. The stock is going to continue to fall. Vince McMahon is not going to be able to save the ship. He's too distracted by the XFL. I cannot wait to hear the questions that the investors ask. I cannot wait. And the fact that, and Barron's mentions this, which was very interesting, the fact that analysts are scrambling to prevent panic. I was wondering why that would be, because your job as an analyst is just to analyze. It's not really to have an opinion. You shouldn't really care whether a particular stock does good or bad. You look at the numbers, you analyze them, you look at market history, and you make a determination based off the data that you're given. And that's not what analysts are doing. Analysts are saying, no, don't panic, don't freak out, even though this thing has taken a 20% drop, 20+% drop. At the end of last year, MarketWatch released a list of 20 stocks to buy. In order to get on this list, this is what they deemed as the top 20 medium cap opportunities of the S&P 400. So they took the medium cap stocks in the S&P 400. They picked 20 of them that 75% or more of analysts determined were buys. World Wrestling Entertainment was on that list, meaning that on December 19th, and granted, this was after the Q3 earnings call, so it had dipped, but it had started to recover coming off of Thanksgiving. It recovered and it was back up, and it was pretty consistently above $60 at that point. Mm-hmm. And they were still saying buy, because it was still far below the $100 cap maximum that it had reached a year or two before then. They had just signed the television deals. They just signed the Saudi Arabia deal, or it looked like they were going to sign the Saudi Arabia deal. And so it looked like for at least the next 5 years, WWE was going to be a secure investment. And 75% of investors disagreed with me and said, you need to buy. Now, in all fairness, I didn't say buy. I said buy a little bit, and only after it reaches certain thresholds. It got to $55. I said, or it got to $60, and I said buy a little bit. And every $5, buy a little bit. And I'm going to advise the same thing now. You're under $50, buy a little bit. It's going to continue to drop. It's not going to see a drop this precipitous, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went to $40. If it gets to $45, buy a little bit more. $40, buy a little bit more. Analysts are trying to cover for themselves. They recommend it as a good investment. And if you invested on December 19th or December 20th, you're 25% poorer now than you were then. However, you'd only be 15% poorer if you listen to me. But again, I'm not telling you to reallocate your IRA into WWE stock. I'm not making it one of my top 20 investments. But if you got an extra $50, $60 lying around, I would highly suggest you invest it here, because we're getting towards the bottom. I mean, I don't see this stock. The company has ballooned to a point that it can't go to $10 again. It can't go to $20 again. I mean, they're gonna go belly up if the stock dips that bad. You're gonna start seeing them dumping promotions. They're gonna be, Fox is gonna want out of their contract because the ratings are gonna be in the toilet. They're gonna start canceling pay-per-views. Performers are gonna start getting released from their contracts. You're gonna start seeing some real writing on the wall if that stock dips under $30, because they're going to be in big trouble. So they're looking. One other interesting fact is it looks like they're obviously going to try to replace that CFO role that George Barrios was holding. Michelle Wilson's background is mostly in marketing, and I have read nothing about them considering replacing her. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if they're going to outsource to a marketing firm, or if they're just not going to make marketing a priority. And it'll be very interesting, to try and read and do some research and figure out why it is that they had strategic differences. Is it just that they disagreed with Vince McMahon, or is it that they disagreed with the entire premise of, how they're tracking OIBDA and using, shares and mentions on social media as one of the key performance indicators for the company? Or is it that they were the ones that initially pushed that and the company's not seeing a benefit from it and now they're letting it go? I'd be very interested to hear whose grand idea it was to follow the path that led WWE financially here. Is it that they've been going down this bad path, and Wilson and Barrios can't keep their mouth shut anymore, or was it their idea and they're the Pied Pipers and they finally got let go? So yeah, my recommendation stands. Go out, buy a share or two of WWE stock. I think it's going to continue to drop, but there is going to come a time when it's going to recover, and that's probably going to be in the next year or so. I think you're going to start to see it come back up again, and you're going to be a little bit wealthier for it.
It's being reported that Vince McMahon is going to be taking time away from WWE, shifting his focus more towards XFL. Obviously, he's a control freak. He's still going to be producing the shows, producing the pay-per-views, doing it over the phone and whatnot, but he is going to be reportedly focusing more on the XFL. Now, with him and with these two releases, that's essentially the top 3 people in the boardroom in the company. How is that going to affect the stocks, the programs, the everything in general, to have the top 3 people not involved anymore?
McMahon's for it, and I mean that very literally. He's going to have to inject a bit of certainty into this. The only way that he can possibly inject some kind of certainty is to find a experienced, competent, capable CFO level person that can take over and inject some kind of financial certainty and give investors the feeling that we're in a nosedive, but it's just a show, and we're going to pull up on the controls and we're going to be fine. He needs to find a leadership role, especially with him not being there. Something like a president, or like a chief managing officer, or something like that. Someone whose job it's going to be to herd the cats, right? Chief technology officer, the chief financial officer, the director of operations, or the chief operating officer. Everybody that sits on the board is going to have to get roped in, and they're all going to have to report daily to one person who then can talk to Vince McMahon. You're going to need someone that's going to be Vince McMahon's eyes and ears on the ground. This person doesn't necessarily need to have a lot of financial aptitude, but they have to be a good leader, and they have to be somebody that Vince trusts. And there are 2 people that Vince could potentially approach on this one, in my opinion, and that's Triple H and Stephanie. Vince isn't going to live forever. Triple H has had a pretty strong role in the talent development. NXT is the brand that it is in many ways thanks to the work that Triple H has done. It appears that Triple H, a lot of the talent development underneath the hands of other capable people. He's taken experienced wrestlers and put them in strategic positions to help young talent develop. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, they don't need to necessarily acquire new talent. It's the other promotions that are sort of getting WWE sloppy seconds, for lack of a better way. People that WWE wants or doesn't want are going off and getting signed by other promotions. And we've talked about some of those people in past videos. Triple H, obviously not a huge financial background, but he's been with the company for a very long time. He's obviously a very trusted, not just personal associate of Vince McMahon's, but he's, a business associate as well. And he is coming off of a very strong success with NXT that's been able to compete with AEW on what is essentially a shoestring budget with very good talent that is working for much less overhead. Hard to believe that just a couple of months before NXT went live on the USA Network, you and I went to go see them at a convention center.
Yep.
For a dark show with a couple hundred seats of very dedicated fans, and just a couple of months later, they're premiering on USA Network up against AEW. I mean, literally a couple of months later. or Stephanie. And Vince is going to live forever. And, Stephanie has obviously always sort of been the heir to the throne, with Shane not really being as heavily involved, always sort of being more of an employee as opposed to a member of the leadership team. He's kind of stepped away recently a little bit since this last storyline with Kevin Owens. Those are the two people that I would think would be the type of people that would corral everyone together and sort of act as a leader. Those are people that Vince must trust. They have good track records with the company. They've got lots of experience inside the business. They know Vince. They know the company. They know a lot of the people on the board quite well, and they both have good recent successes that they can point to. So I would not be surprised at all. That would be a great way to, the McMahon family is committed to this company. We're going to be here. It's not going to fall on the wayside of XFL. Vince is going in another direction, but I care about WWE enough that, obviously the board is the one that's going to have to vote. But those are the two people that I could picture. They bring in someone from the outside. I mean, it depends on bring in, but you're taking a risk. I mean, putting direct day-to-day control in the hands of somebody not named or married to a McMahon. I think you're taking a risk. So you have to hire a chief financial officer from outside the company. But I think that you can hire a managing director or a chief managing director or something like that to help herd everybody together, and that would drive a sense of certainty. Those are the only two names I can think of. There might be somebody else behind the scenes that I'm not particularly familiar with that's angling for that position, that has some successes that I'm not particularly aware of. But given the criticality here, the fact that they dumped it on a Thursday tells me that either they felt that they felt that there was a gun to their heads and they had to dump it on a Thursday, or that they didn't think it would hurt them this much.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, this is a sign of either panic or relaxation. Nothing in between. Nobody dumps news like that on a Thursday that both of your leaders are going at the exact same time, right before a financial call. My suspicion is that the other prediction I always have is that Vince McMahon is going to sort of get on the financial call and he's going to go, well, took the trash out. Every bad thing that's happened is the fault of these two. Every negative thing that's occurred, we gave them their shot. They failed quarter after quarter after quarter to deliver the company. I know this feels like uncertainty, but long term, this is going to be the right decision. I'm hoping that he uses that call as his way of saying, okay, the past is the past. 2019 is over, and we're going to move forward. And to show my commitment to the company, this is the person that I'm recommending to the board.
That's what's
the board
being
is
speculated, is that they're going to be the scapegoats.
I mean that has to be. Vince McMahon does not have any other option. What is he going to say? If he doesn't say that, what is he going to say? So I'm very excited to listen to this investors call, which is coming on February 6th. It'll be very telling, and we'll just have to see what Vince McMahon says. I'll tell you what, if Vince McMahon is not on that call, stop buying. I'll tell everyone right now, stop buying if Vince McMahon isn't on that call, because it could very well drop much lower than you want it to go. You want it to go to $40 or $30 and then start to come back up again. But if it goes to 20, if it goes to even 30, yeah, you're going to start seeing them. You're going to start. You're cutting into muscle and bone at that point. You're not trimming the fat at that point. You're cutting into some really important stuff.
When is that call supposed to take place again?
February 6th.
So next week.
I won't be on the call because it's done in the middle of the day, and I'm a working bum. But within 24 hours, the call will be posted along with the presentation. So we can probably do this. We can probably do a follow up on this the week after next. we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up on Wrestling with the Business. We've got a rules review that we're going to do for the XFL. The XFL premieres February 8th on Fox. I'm going to watch as many games as I possibly can of that, because I think it's interesting. We'll do a rules review. We'll do a review of the game and talk about sort of how we thought things worked out. And then I think a financial review is definitely in order, and it'll be very interesting to hear what the investors have to say.
Stay tuned to all of our social medias and the website and everything to find out when everything's going on. And until we see you again, always remember, always keep kayfabe, follow the money, and we'll keep wrestling with the business.